All right, here we go. This is Mac Bolin, owner and operator of Lock and Load Productions. And here we go. We are starting the shooting season 2019. I have here with me Big Bad Bill Cochran, and hopefully we'll get Jason Carrillo in here too. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to Dan Andrew. Hernia, kind of laid up right now, buddy. Heal fast, and hope to see you out at the range soon. Also, I want to mention two people, Colton Parcham and Mike Labath, do a lot of work setting up the USPSA and the three-gun stuff out at Aurora Sportsman's Club. Folks, believe me, they are guys behind the scene. I mean, they also shoot, but they do a lot to organize these competitions. And, of course, I've mentioned Jim Welker in the past. But absolutely props to them. And so, Bill, for you, competitive shooting is kind of a year-round thing.
It is. I'm lucky enough to live down in Texas, in the Houston area, so our weather's pretty good year-round, and we're able to get 12 months of shooting in. A lot of local matches and whatnot, and what everybody else calls the off-season. But yep, it's a year-round deal.
But you also travel. You go out of state quite a bit.
I do. During the season, and I say during the season, right? Texas Three Gun Championship is this weekend, and that's really kind of traditionally kicked off the three gun season, especially down here in the South. But I've already hit 3 major matches in the last month. Plus, I did the Baton Death March Memorial with my son in New Mexico last week.
And White Sands Missile Range, and I did it myself.
yeah. So you saw the videos, and
yes, I did.
There.
And it's a ball buster, now. That's a ball buster.
I'll tell you what, I paid full price for doing that one. But, it was well worth it. But yeah, I travel probably to at least 1 or 2 majors a month, 8 or 9 months out of the year.
Good. And now you and on your page, and this is something I've always wanted to ask, because you say you shoot heavy metal division.
Correct.
And 1, why? And then 2, what your gear is.
So, heavy division is kind of an interesting bunch. You got a lot of the really old school guys that go back to, even some of the Soldier of Fortune type stuff that, they're just old school and they just love the sport, right? Heavy division, true heavy, when you're shooting a 12 gauge pump, you're shooting the magazine restrictions with a 10-round pistol and a 20-round rifle. It becomes a really tactical game, right? Because you have to manage your ammunition, you have to really make your shots count. It just changes the feel of the game a lot. There's obviously a lot of attraction to the big guns, right? I mean, there's nothing better than showing up in a match and breaking all the steel with your rifle when you get there.
Yeah.
And all the match directors probably hate to hear me say that, but it's true. There's just something about that big rifle. It's heavier, it's bulkier, there's more recoil. Quite frankly, it's just more of a challenge, and it's one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of people shooting heavy now. Lately, you've seen a lot of clubs try to attract more heavy shooters. In fact, this weekend at Texas Three Gun, which has always got a great turnout for heavy division, and this year I think is the biggest turnout they've ever had for heavy division. It's a heavy rifle, but it's the same pistol and shotgun that you would shoot in practical. So you get the advantages of shooting the big rifle without maybe the mag restrictions and the let's just call it the separate skill set that you need for a pump gun.
Sure. Well, plus you have the one hit advantage.
Correct. Yeah, you've got the one hit advantage. Although if you shoot UML, some of the other outlaw matches from time to time will make you have 2 hits even on paper with the rifle. And now sometimes you'll get I'm kind of I fall into a couple of camps there. when a match has 2 hits on paper as a requirement, and they're giving you the mag restrictions, man, that really makes it tough. And the Fort Benning match is that way. For heavy division, it's 2 hits on paper, but you're restricted on your magazines. So it really then becomes a tactical game of, and kind of a creative game of gear. Where are you going to store that many magazines, right? I mean, there's only so much real estate on your belt. And you've got to, sometimes you got to carry 7, 8. I know this last year we had one stage where I was carrying 8 10-round magazines just for my pistol into one stage, right? So, I mean, it's crazy.
That is crazy.
But normally you're looking at, 1 round on paper to neutralize with both the pistol and the rifle. And that kind of mitigates a little bit of the magazine restrictions and kind of makes sense. I mean, no sense blowing 2 big holes in a target when you can just right? I mean,
when you talk about real estate on a belt, I mean, I'm a guy, I'm a smaller guy, 5'7". I got a 32-inch waist. I don't have a whole lot of room.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, and guys are getting creative. I mean, I built a drop leg rig that really has served me really well because it's built on a Safariland drop leg shroud, and with the caddies that I use from Invictus, I can get 12 rounds on each caddy. Well, the way this drop leg is configured, I can get 36 rounds of shotgun off of my belt and onto my leg, which leaves a lot more room for, magazines and everything else that I need to have on my belt. So, it's kind of getting to the point where you got stuff everywhere. I mean, you got stuff on your legs, on your belt. I mean, before you know it, guys are going to be having backpacks and chest rigs and everything else to try to get through that. So it's, heavy is a challenge. I mean, there's nothing easy about it, which is, kind of the attraction to it. I think it's a different kind of game within our game.
Right. And one of the reasons, and I want to say this because I've said it before in several other podcasts, the attraction of action shooting sports and competitive shooting, and I've always said this statement before, and I'm going to say it again. If you're somebody who, say, is just a handgun owner or you're concealed carry, if you want to improve your skills, there is obviously, it's not combat because no one's shooting at you, but if you want to improve your skills and you want to test yourself, put yourself in a stress position, put yourself under the clock in a stage where you're moving, you're shooting, it's you're adapting to an environment. This is what you should do. And the thing is, in the competitive shooting world, the people are friendly, they're open and willing to give advice. If you're a first-time shooter, it doesn't matter. And I always suggest this. If you want to get better, this is the way to get better.
Oh, it absolutely is. And, you're seeing a real move in that direction out of both the military and law enforcement. I mean, you're seeing people in those career fields who compete on their own, but now you're starting to see some of the, higher ups starting to recognize the value of competitive shooting for, people who carry a gun for a living. I was a police officer for 13 years, and 5 years of that, I was on a multi-jurisdictional SWAT team, and 5 years I was a canine officer. And man, I wish I had known about 3-gun back then. I don't even know if they had 3-gun back then, but I would have loved to have had the skill set that comes with 3-gun. And, it's funny because there's always this discussion about, well, a competitive shooting will get you killed on the street. We just went out and there was 6 of us, 3-gunners, who we went out and ran the tactical games over in Meridian, Mississippi last month. And we were running against some of the best conditioned combat veteran SWAT officers. We were running against, special operations folks, and they were great. I mean, they just really, opened up, invited us in and let us play in their arena. And they were dumbfounded at the level of speed and accuracy that we were able to engage targets with. And, Jared Halbert, he won the elite division, which has been dominated by these, red meat eating carnivores out of, special operations guys like,
I'm one of them. I'm one of them.
There, right? You were one. So, these guys are exquisitely conditioned and they're extremely talented, but you can't outrun accuracy, right? And when it came time to put rounds on target, our folks were doing it so much faster that, Jared won the elite division. Tess Saab, she went in and just demolished the women's division. I mean, just absolutely crushed it. And, Tennille Chidester, she came in and took third in the women's division. Mark Roth and I took, ninth and 10th in the masters division. I mean, there's a lot to be said for, being able to deliver accurate fire with devastating speed, right? I mean, there's, and this, you've been there. I mean, there's nothing more effective as a defensive mechanism than putting the opponent down, right? I mean, it just straight up. You can talk all you want about, it's not realistic when they're not shooting back. Well, the best way to make sure they're not shooting back is to put rounds on target. And, it's such an important skill set. And like you mentioned, the one thing that you can't replicate standing in a lane at a range, that allows you to shoot one round per second and, take your time and not draw from the holster, you're never going to replicate the stress of a real world, situation. I mean, when it's in the fan, and it, and I know it, and anybody who's been in law enforcement or the military and been in any kind of combat operation, it's a whole different world, right? I mean, that level of stress is going to definitely affect your accuracy and your survivability. And, the thing that really struck us at the tactical games was the way three gunners were able to adapt to the situation, right? And all of us that went were well conditioned. I mean, in fact, everybody that won a division was, a CrossFit athlete, but it was more than just the conditioning. It was the ability to get in there and control your breathing and engage targets very quickly and move on to the next stage that won the day. And, it was very telling to see that happen. And we had a lot of guys from, that are either special operations veterans or actually active now that came to us and asked us about, where can I sign up for the next 3-gun match? I want to start playing in your arena because I can see how it's going to make me better in mine.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And actually, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be in a unit where we had a big budget and we brought in professional shooters. And going all the way back to the day, a guy who I could mention, John Shaw, who probably nobody knows now, but back then, he was a 3-gun shooter before there was anything really 3-gun. And we brought in guys like him and Jerry Barnhart, and I could go on simply because of the fact that, learn from pros and use what they know and adapt it to tactical situations.
Sure. And, for somebody who, like you said, is a civilian and they're carrying every day. And, if you're doing what you should, which is to carry every single day, it's more than just carrying, right? I mean, the firearm is just a tool. It's the mind that's the weapon. It's the ability, the talent, the experience, that you put yourself through that's going to get you through that situation intact and whole and be able to survive it if and when it should ever happen. And, I think a lot of people just think, well, I've got my concealed carry permit and I've got my gun, so I'm going to be fine. But we all know that when it's down and it really happens, you're gonna regress to your lowest level of habitual training. And if that is, pulling your gun out of your holster every night, putting it on the nightstand, if that's the extent of your training, then you're in for a rough week. I used to, like I said, I was a police officer. We used to hear stories all the time about cops back in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, back when revolvers were being issued, and they would, they'd find these guys at the scene of a shootout dead with a pocket full of brass, right?
Because that's how they were trained.
That's how and that's what was messed up about it was, they would get on the range and they would shoot, and they didn't want to police up their brass. So what would they do? They'd dump the brass in their hand, and then they'd put it in their pocket, and then they'd load the pistol back up and go to the next string. And again, you're going to regress to the lowest level of your habitual training when everything is in the fan. And the thing that's great about three-gun, thing that's great about shooting sports in general, is that it recreates that stress, and it really shows you how, you might be able to load your shotgun in 2.5 seconds, right?
Yep.
Standing in your living room with the air conditioner on, and or heater, I guess, where you're at. Yep. But that doesn't mean anything when that buzzer goes off and you have to shoot 14 pistol targets, and then dump the pistol, make sure it's on safe, pick up the shotgun and start engaging targets, and now you got to hit a reload on the run. I don't care how fast you can do it in your living room. That ain't gonna matter at all. How fast can you do it out there? Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the first things, because I just started shooting competitively last year, coming from a tactical shooting background. And one of the first things I realized, about knowing the rules, target fixation, and knowing the difference, because time is a factor, and sitting there and with a handgun at a fairly far away KD target and sitting there firing 5 rounds and saying in my mind, go down, motherfucker, go down. And then saying to myself, what the hell am I doing? And then, of course, you realize afterwards, 1, maybe 2 rounds, but hey, you know what? Move on and go on to the next target, because you're killing time, because a lot of these competitions are very time sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that time sensitivity is what really creates a lot of the stress, right? And
absolutely.
I mean, it. There's no good way to replicate the stress of combat, right? Because unlike in Russia, we can't, take our soldiers out there and actually shoot at them. The best thing, I guess, is that we can go out and put them under some form of stress, and you can put them under physical stress. You can put them under, doing some PT while or before you're shooting.
Yeah.
Can help replicate some of that, but nothing does it like the clock. I mean, having to shoot on the clock, and I just shot. I didn't shoot heavy. I shot, because they didn't have a heavy division, at the Rock Hard matchup at Rock Castle, right? Part of the Hardest Hell series.
Oh boy, those are tough.
These are 5-minute stages, right? I mean, you've got 300 seconds. And I'm going to say that probably 60% of the people or more that shot that match timed out, because there was just so much movement and so much shooting involved, right? And like you said, people would get hung up and they'd go to war with one target, and and end up not being able to finish the stage and take a big hit on the 14 or 15 targets that they didn't never engage.
For the FTs, right? And speaking of that, you mentioned the Hard as Hell. Just go ahead and, because some people don't know, go ahead and just let them know what the Hard as Hell competitions are like. I know Jason mentioned it on a podcast I had last year, but people don't realize how bad those are.
It's a absolutely awesome idea, and it started with the Hard as Hell series that Ken Nelson, those guys run out in Utah, and I ran that a couple of years ago. And the Hard as Hell matches they are long, physical stages where you're climbing walls, you're climbing ropes, they actually went out and dug a trench, right? And I'm not talking about a little trench. It's like a freaking World War I trench warfare scenario. And you're shooting rifles, you shoot the rifle, and then you sling it, and you pick up your shotgun, and you're running through the trench, and you're engaging targets all through the trenches, and then you hop out of the trenches, and then you run and dump your shotgun, you grab your pistol and jump in another trench, and now you're running through the trenches, engaging all these targets with the pistol, and then you dump your pistol, and you got a bunch of long rifle stuff that you've got to engage in. These stages are 5 minutes. I mean, it's just a very, very physically demanding kind of stage, and you're doing 6 or 7 of these stages over the course of a couple of days. It's a very tough setup. Well, then they took that and they said, well, let's go ahead and take this nationwide.
Yeah.
And now they've got a series of 4 Hard as Hell matches throughout the country. Rock Castle, one in Texas, I believe they do one in West Virginia, and then of course the Utah, the original Utah one out in St. George. And it actually is a championship, so you're competing throughout the year in this thing. And these are great matches, because I think one of the things that unfortunately has happened in the shooting sports, a lot of the shooting sports, is that obviously it's important to have the focus on shooting and accuracy, but a lot of physicality was taken out. And matches that traditionally were very physical, like the Fort Benning match, kind of dumbed it down and made it easier physically, and there wasn't as much climbing or running or jumping. And Hard as Hell and the Hard as Hell series gives those of us who are interested in that component of it somewhere to go and really play that game. And now with the tactical games coming up, boy, that takes it to a whole other level. I mean, you're talking about stages that could be 15 to 45 minutes long,
right?
And very similar to the CTE type things that the federal agencies will do, or a combat readiness test that you might have done back in the day when you were in.
Yep. Yeah, and another thing you might want to mention about the Hard as Hell series, you ain't no gun buggy. You got to carry your shit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And in fact, Mark Roth, the guy just kills me. We've been spending quite a bit of time here together lately, because we shot Hard as Hell together, and then we drove up and we shot we shot the tactical games, and then we drove up to Rock Castle and shot the Rock Hard, Hard as Hell series. And, Mark, the guy was carrying like 120 pounds of gear, right? He had, every gun you can imagine. And he's out there carrying this stuff in flip-flops, smoking a cigarette, right? And it's just crazy. And the thing about Trooper Division and the Hard as Hell is that you carry all of your gear, right, and your ammo.
Yep.
And you carry it in 2-3 miles from your vehicle, and then that's all you got for the day, right? So if you run out of ammo, that's on you. So you've got to carry everything in there. And I mean, it's tough. And if you do Trooper Division and Utah, you do it with a plate carrier, right? So you're in full kit.
Yeah.
It's tough. It really is. I mean, it's some of those are, and again, I don't know what it is. Some people are just drawn to this kind of thing, but these super difficult, super challenging matches, and then a heavy division. It's you got to be a different kind of cat to be playing these games.
Yeah, and back in the day when I was still in the military, we did shooting. It was stress shooting, and we were wearing full kit, body armor, everything running, and it's physical. I mean, it whips your ass. Now, it's funny because the first time I went out to a 3-gun match, which was last year, and going in knowing absolutely nothing about the situation. I was carrying all my stuff, and I was humping about 110 pounds, and I saw people pushing those baby strollers and everything, and I kind of snickered a little bit. And then by the end of the day, I was saying to myself, maybe that's not a bad idea.
You might need to get yourself one of those baby strollers, right?
Yeah, it was. It made things interesting. Also, and I mentioned this in a previous podcast. First time I went out, I had nothing but double-aught buck and slugs. And the very first stage I went through, I was knocking the shit out of stuff. And the guy says, "What are you using?" And I said, "Double-aught buck." He said, "You can't use that." I said, "Why not?" No. It's got to be birdshot. It's got to be like 7 or 9. I'm like, well, nobody told me that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, though, there were a lot of people there who had plenty of extra ammo and actually, good, and said, "Yeah, here, go ahead, take this. I didn't know any better.
Right. Well, and that just kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier with the shooting sports in general, being very open to newcomers, right, and very welcoming. And we all were new once, right? I mean, I came in from a SWAT background, so I show up in my first 3-gun match, and I've got a drop leg thigh holster, right, nylon holster, and vest. Like you said, I mean, I'm carrying my stuff in a plate carrier, and it was just one of those kinds of situations. Sure. But people were more than willing to help us out, and loan you gear, and give you whatever advice you were willing to receive,
Sure.
and really just help you out. And I think it's incumbent on us as we move up through the ranks and become more adept and more capable. Start picking up sponsors and whatnot, that you become a good representative of the sport, whether you're sponsored or not, but especially if you are.
Yeah.
Be a good representative, a good steward, and help newer folks out and answer their questions and take the time. And there's some guys out there who are phenomenal at that. You mentioned Jay. Jay is just a tremendously talented shooter. He's very quick. He's very fast. But the thing that everybody always remembers about Jay is just how friendly and outgoing he is, and that he do anything for you. I mean, if it's amazing. We see it all the time when we show up in a match. Somebody, inevitably, because of the volume of fire that we put through these firearms, something breaks, and there'll be 3 or 4 people there who are standing there with extra parts or tools or whatever needs to get done. And, we're competing against each other, right? I mean, it's just crazy that you'll see people literally at the very top level. I mean, if you see, Michael Whitesides with Dissonant Arms, who, I've been shooting on the Dissonant Arms team for going on 5 years now. And I mean, I started with them when they very first started out, and Michael shoots open division, and there's been a couple times there that he's been able to beat Jerry Michalik, and I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. But
yeah, I would say so.
I mean, there are times where something will go down on a pistol, or Jerry needed a battery one time for something, and Michael's right there to help him out. And the same token, other guys are doing the same at the top level. I mean, you just don't see that in other sports.
No.
Where you have that, look, I'll help you beat me, right? I mean, it's just crazy. But I think when people coming into the sport see that, and they see and understand, how we're competitive, but at the same time, we're all in this together. And when it comes right down to it, and we know this, you especially know it where you're at, our game is under constant attack, right? I mean, and it's not just our game; it's our actual fundamental rights that are just under constant withering attack. And I think what we do in the sport helps to bring us together as a community, and helps to grow that knowledge. And if you're stuck up, if you're arrogant, if you're whatever, standoffish, and new people want to come into the sport, well, you're doing a lot more damage than just the sport, right? You're turning people off to our community of Second Amendment supporters. And this is where we grow, right? This is where we get the grassroots going. And you see some things going on now with the DC project, and folks who are reaching outside of the shooting sports to really have an impact nationwide. And a lot of the companies that we seek out and get sponsorship from are companies that myself personally, I like to find companies that have a strong heritage in the Second Amendment and do a lot to support not just the sport, but outside of the sport. I think a lot of times in the sport, we hear people saying, we want to support the companies that support the sport. And that's absolutely true. But we need to look at companies and encourage them to support outside of the sport, right? And to go after, opportunities to bring people on board to help support the Second Amendment, because we need that now more than ever. I mean, we're under attack now in ways that, 20, 30 years ago, I couldn't even imagine some of the craziness that's going on.
Yeah, it's insane.
We've gained so much, and we've gotten so much in the way of Second Amendment freedoms, and you see, now 14 states that are constitutional carry states where you don't have to have a permit, and you shouldn't, to carry. And that's great, but I think there's been some backlash from that, and now you constantly see the attacks coming from the left. And we got to do, as members of the sport, we got to do everything that we can to be good representatives of the companies that sponsor us, and then to really encourage those companies to go outside and use their influence uh, to push our agenda, which ultimately, I mean, our agenda is nothing more than, hey, I have a constitutional right. It's right there in the Constitution, right under the,
Yep.
I mean, it was so freaking important that they're like, all right, well, it's the second one. All right. You got freedom of speech. And then, oh, by the way, here's how you're going to defend it. And, that's our God-given right. And it's something that we need to be willing to stand our ground and fight, at the ballot box or on the battlefield, whatever it's going to take to defend that.
Absolutely. And I would like to make a point here, because the Second Amendment and the first 10 amendments are part of the Bill of Rights. And the Second Amendment doesn't give the right to own firearms. What it does is it recognizes
and protects
the right and protects it to bear firearms. And people don't understand, it's not just for self-defense, it's for protection against tyranny, which, of course, when it was instituted, because we had to deal with the English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not like the founding fathers had just fought a war against white-tailed deer. I mean, it was this nonsense that it's just about hunting or it's just about self-defense. I mean, it's about self-defense. It's about defense of, of oneself against thugs and tyrants of all levels, right? And so it doesn't matter if it's somebody trying to take your wallet, take your life, or take your freedoms. The fact of the matter is, we in this country are uniquely blessed with a constitution that recognizes our God-given right to self-defense.
Yep.
And enshrines and protects from the government our right to keep and bear arms, right? And that's where I think people get it mixed up. They don't understand, and you're exactly right. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights do not give us rights; they simply protect our God-given right from our government.
Exactly.
And that's the key. That's the thing that people don't understand. And right. Sadly, they're not teaching this in the schools. They wouldn't dare do that, because we wouldn't want people actually knowing what the rights are.
Right.
Right. But we, I think we in the shooting sports are uniquely positioned to be able to do that. I know, people will stop me at the gym or talk to me, on the street, because they may see one of my videos or they know what I do. And if I don't take the time to talk to that person and encourage them to come out to the range, or, I mean, I frequently will have people say, hey, Bill, I'm thinking of buying a gun, but I don't know which one. And, I'm a little uncomfortable with them. As somebody in the shooting sports with a little bit more visibility, it's incumbent on us to say, hey, you know what? I'll go with you. Let's go to a range where you can rent a couple of guns and you could shoot some of mine and see which ones you like. I'm willing to take you and show you what ammo to maybe consider, what gun, what holster, take you to the range and get you comfortable with it, because we need that, right? We need more of those people. And, Texas, we're lucky. It is very much part of the culture. And Texas has a very strong constitution and constitutional protections, of our firearms. So, it's not as unusual here as it maybe is in other states, but I get that a lot, that people will see the YouTube videos and they see the Instagram and they see the jersey, and, they might, for example, here in Texas, I get a lot of, people will see me wearing, like my Vortex hat or, some of my Vortex gear when I'm out shooting videos or I'm out practicing. And they might be a deer hunter that uses a Vortex crossfire scope, and they'll stop me and we'll just start talking. And before you know it, they're getting excited about it. Somebody else will come over. And, being a good steward of the Second Amendment means that we have to be out there. We have to be in the public. We have to be willing to speak our mind, and stand on our values and defend those American values that we were raised with. I mean, I started shooting guns when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And it was just, my dad, he wasn't a big hunter. He wasn't a big shooter, but he always believed in, your right to do so, and was really instrumental in forging that in me and saying, okay, look, here's a 22 and, we're going to go out and we're going to do a little shooting. And when we went out and shot, we spent most of that time talking about, how lucky we were in this country to have that right protected, right? And so we have to do a better job, I think, in the shooting sports of being part of that education and that process of really pushing that agenda. And I say pushing the agenda. We shouldn't even have to push the agenda. I mean, it's right there in the Constitution.
It's a right. It's not an agenda. It's a right.
It's a right. And the thing is that the left is doing everything they can to make it seem like it's not a right, to make it seem like it's a convenience privilege.
Yep.
And it's not. I mean, and unless somebody the other day was arguing with me about this and making the point that, well, there aren't that many people that feel that way. And I had to remind them that the first time we had this problem, right, with a little king over there in England, it was really only 3% of the population that was engaged in combat operations. So, you know what? I bet you I can find 3% of people in this country who were willing to stand their ground and defend this right.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's sad that we even have to think like that, but that's the truth. That's the fact.
It is.
We are going to have to, like I said, be willing to fight at the ballot box first and elsewhere if need be to defend our right, to keep and bear arms and to do things like we do in the shooting sports. One of the great things about the shooting sports is that it is one of the purest exercises of that right. I mean,
absolutely.
Get together and get together a bunch of friends and go out and shoot 300-400 rounds over the course of a weekend and do it competitively and have that brotherhood and that camaraderie that comes from that. It's a great opportunity, and like I said, it's kind of I would compare it to the First Amendment. I mean, we have the right to worship in whatever way we see fit. So, if you want to go to church on Sunday and you're a Baptist, great. That's more power to you. If you're Catholic, that's fine. If you're, going to get together with a bunch of friends on a Sunday in Burnett, Texas, and, shoot a match, you're exercising that same right that's in the Constitution, right? And it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. Now, back to what you were saying about guys being open and easy to work with. The first, my youngest son, I brought out to a USPSA match at Oak Park Sportsman's Club down in Plainfield. And basically, I'm shooting limited 10, 45 caliber. He's shooting a 9mm. He had a couple of bad stages. He's running out of ammo. I ran down to Joel Maydog, and I went to him. I said, Joel, can you give me about 100, 150 rounds? And he taught it without even thinking, tosses me a couple of boxes. Yeah, here, no problem. So I run back over there to my kid. I said, here you go. Fire it up. I mean, that's the beauty of the sport as it is. And when we talk also about, guys like you are seasoned, competitive, guys who just broke into the sport. And last year, we were on the same squad at the Mission 22 Multi-Gun Championships. And I like this particularly. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great. But that one particular stage, and I got to bring this up because, we were talking, and I was sitting here, and you actually came up to me, and you said, so what are you going to start with? I said, well, I'm going to start my rifle. You said, well, think about this. If you're standing here in the center, if you start with your shotgun, you can hit every single one of these targets from the middle, dump it, and then take your rifle, and then you've got targets on the left, targets on the right. And I took about 2 seconds. I said, yeah, that's right. And that was actually probably one of the better stages I had because it made total sense. But that's why I like the sharing of information, because when you do these kind of competitions, you break down stages. Every now and then, either if you watch somebody else or you get a little bit of advice, it's always helpful. And that's one of the things which you were speaking about, which I just absolutely love about doing this sport.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's there to help everybody out. And, again, like I said, and you even see it at the top level, which is, to me, really kind of astonishing that you'll see guys at the very top of the game literally help a guy out who is their next competitor and do whatever they can to help them out. And the guys at the top of the game, are always there to help you learn, right? And I think, if I was going to give advice to people who are just starting out in the game, it would be to ask questions, right? Find that person who, you might watch them for the first stage or two, and that you'll see them. They're the ones who really kind of have the game figured out. And if you'll spend a little bit of time and ask them questions, I've been fortunate. I've had the opportunity to squad with a lot of the top tier competitors in the game. I ended up on a super squad just because of the way it timed out, and I ended up getting into a match a little bit late and on a sponsor slot, and I ended up on a squad. And I mean, man, it was everybody in the game. I mean, Keith Garcia was on that squad. Nick Birdsall was on that squad. Greg Jordan was on that squad. I mean, it was just a freaking super squad. And I'm like, man, this is going to be horrible, right? Because I'm just going to get demolished every single stage on this thing. And, what was amazing is every one of those guys, we'd be walking the stage and, in the walkthroughs, and every one of those guys was willing to, point things out to me and show me where you could pick up a step or two here, or if you delayed your mag change till over here, you would have. It was just amazing to see how willing they were to help and how much you grow as an individual when you're around those kind of people, right? I mean, one of the things that taught me, and it didn't teach me, it reinforced something that I already knew, and that's that, don't be afraid to be around people who are so much better than you, that are such a higher level. And if you find yourself in that situation, take advantage of it and ask them questions, learn from them, because there's so much growth. That one match, it propelled me forward years just by being around people like that. And I've had opportunities to squad with Jerry Michalik, and Jerry's just a great guy. I mean, the guy is always out there resetting. He's always out there helping people out. But, I mean,
his daughter's pretty good too.
Yeah. Not a bad shooter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's a freaking legend. It's just ridiculous. But, it can be intimidating approaching somebody like that. But boy, I'll tell you, anytime I've ever seen somebody approach Jerry, myself included, and ask a question, he's so gracious with the information, and he's so willing to share it with you, and do anything for you. And it's just, it's a very unique sport in that regard. And, you bring it back around to heavy division. It's kind of funny, in the heavy division, we're all kind of strange birds, and we're all in kind of the same boat, right? Because you go to any match that has a true heavy division, you probably got 5 or 6 guys who are in it, right? I mean, there's not very many. And, it's kind of funny because you see a lot of the same sponsorship. I mentioned Vortex. You're not going to find very many companies that do as much for our sport as Vortex does. I mean,
they're great. They're great.
Phenomenal. Briley Manufacturing down here in Houston, you're seeing more and more of their gear and their guns out in the out in the 3-gun arena. And Briley was always known for chokes, and that was it, right? But turns out Briley has a tremendous operation building top-tier 3-gun shotguns, right? And they partnered with Michael and Lan at Dissident Arms, and man, that partnership has just blown up. The amount of gear that we can get now as 3-gunners, right? I mean, you've got companies big and small, right? I mean, you got Mark Roth's company, great guy, and I'm not sponsored.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, so I on the one hand, I probably shouldn't be plugging him, but he's such a great guy and such.
Well, I got to say this straight up, and not to interrupt you, but talking with Jason, I had him on a few podcasts. One of my biggest issues in the 3-gun, because I shoot factory division, was trying to get the effing quad load down, and I got the Benelli, and I went ahead and I looked at that RB3G, and it made perfect sense to get something with a bigger loading channel.
Well, and the thing that Mark did is he's such an innovator, right? I mean, he looks at what everybody else is doing, right? And you've had people for years that have been doing the loading ports and building out competition shotguns, with the tube extensions and so forth.
Yep.
And what Mark did is he took that and he just kind of revolutionized it and said, well, here, how about if I just build the whole receiver for you? Now you don't have to send your gun in, right? Now you don't have to send your gun in and have the work done, which was really innovative of Mark. And you know, he's a great guy. I mean, I just love him to death. He's just one of those guys he's the real deal, right? He's out there in the trenches with you every weekend. I mean, you go to a match anywhere, he's probably there, either ROing or shooting or both. And, you know, the guy just nonstop. I mean, he's always working on somebody's shotgun. Somebody has a problem. Mark's got the solution for it. And, you know, and that's one of the reasons he's been so successful. And, you know, you look at it, somebody who's a small shop like Mark, and then you take a look at a big operation like Briley. I mean, Briley's a monster company. And when I first got sponsored by Briley, they took us through the factory and walked us through. And I was just astounded. I mean, I was dumbfounded at how big that operation is. And, you know, the things that they were willing to do. I mean, they brought us on board, you know, the entire Dissident Arms team, myself, Michael Land, Nick Miller. They brought all of us on board and they walked us through the shop and they said, okay, now you've seen what we're capable of. You tell us what you need, because we're going to consider you guys like the you know, Ford driving racing team.
Sure.
You know, because back in the 50s and 60s, you know, the Ford team is what developed a lot of the technology that we even use today, right? And so they were looking at it and saying, if we can develop cutting edge technology that works on the competitive you know, envelope, then we can bring that to the duck hunter who's sitting in a blind on, you know, in December down in South Texas and make his shotgun work better or make his gear work more consistently. So to their credit, you know, you have this huge corporation that was willing to come over here into this little tiny niche market that we've got and say, you know what, we're willing to invest in you guys and sponsor you guys and help you take your game to the next level, obviously, with the best gear we can give you, but be able to take that information and that feedback back to our production. And so they've come up with a line of choke tubes that is just phenomenal. I mean, it's stunning what they've been able to do with the 3-gun chokes and now be able to take that over to you know, the bird hunters or to the
hunting side. Sure.
You know, so it's a small industry. I mean, it's a small part of the industry. The shooting sports, and especially 3-gun,
yeah.
I think sometimes we forget just how really insignificant we are.
Yeah.
You know, as far as shooting sports go. And all you have to do is come to a sporting clays event down here in South Texas and see it. I mean, there'll be, you know, 500 competitors signed up. And these guys are driving around in golf carts that are like, you know, I mean, nicer than most people's cars. I mean, it's just amazing the money that goes into that sport and the size of that sport. And, you know, sometimes I think at 3-gun, we think we're all that, and we're not. I mean, we're a small part of that shooting sports community. But
I'll say one thing about shooting clays. If you want to learn how to shoot moving targets, that's the way you train.
I'll tell you this, if you ever come and shoot the Texas 3-gun match, you better go shoot some clays first. Because, man, I'll tell you what, Kurt and Aaron over there, they just like to put a lot of clay in the air. And, I mean, you'll have stuff crossing. You'll have stuff shooting straight up in the air. You'll have stuff. I mean, it's just crazy. A lot of fun. But, boy, I'll tell you what, you get out there and, you know, and we'll actually do it. We'll take our Briley Benelli M2s that are, you know, I mean, they're custom built by Briley. They got a tube that, you know, will hold 14 rounds in it. And we'll go to a sporting clays match and shoot doubles out of this thing. And, you know, everybody, of course, freak out when they see your shotgun. It's 9 feet long. Yeah. But, you know, it's kind of cool because you get to experience another side of the shooting sports, right? Something outside of our own kind of echo chamber.
Sure. And one of the things I want to mention, you know, because I used this phrase before, you know, if you're a first-time shooter, my biggest phrase and advice is be a sponge. Soak it up.
No question.
Ask questions. Nobody's going to turn you down. Ask advice. Take it all in. Learn. And that's probably the simplest advice I could give. You know, if you're a first-time shooter, I don't care if it's USPSA, practical rifle, 3-gun, be a sponge. First-time shooter, go in there, soak it up, ask questions, watch, listen, learn.
Absolutely. And you know, I was telling you before we started, you know, I literally just came in off the range. We've got Texas 3-gun this weekend, and Joe Farewell flew in, and he's done a couple seminars that I've hosted here. And, you know, the one thing I would tell new shooters is don't be afraid to pay for a little education, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It amazes me how, especially in 3-gun, I don't know what it is about 3-gun, but people will spend, you know, $200 or $300 for an entry fee, you know, $400 or $500 for a plane ticket, you know, $500 for hotels and food and everything else, go to a match and just suck, right? Which is fine when you're new. I get that.
Yeah.
But, you know, by the time it's all said and done, you've spent $1,000 to be at a match that you're probably not ready for, where you could have spent $300 or $400 going to a seminar, right? And progress so much more rapidly from somebody who's been there, done that, and can show you the little things that will help you improve. And, you know, this year I've made a significant investment in training. I'm already signed up for 4 different seminars and workshops with Joe, with Daniel Horner, with, you know, several other shooters, both in our sport and then specialists outside of our sport, right? So just to hone that blade and to really get to a point where you're seeing that growth and expansion that, you know, as I'm doing it, I'm like, man, I would really wish I would have done this the first year in, right? And I think sometimes we start thinking that we know better. I can figure this out, right? Well, yeah, you can eventually figure it out, but, you know, you're going to spend 5 years of going to match after match after match and never getting above, you know, the bottom 25%, right? Because there's so many people in this game that are so good.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, you and I know it because when you get in the game, I mean, it's amazing. You'll shoot a stage and you're like, okay, well, I did that in, you know, 49 seconds, right? So it's a short stage. And Horner will come out there and he'll do it in 20. And you're like, how the hell is he knocking 30 seconds off of my time on a 50-second stage?
Yep.
you sit there and you're just dumbfounded. You're like, how the hell does he do that? And, you know, guys like Jay's footwork is just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's
you know,
he's fast.
If people would take a little time and pay somebody, you know, like a Jay Carrillo, like a Joe Farewell, like, you know, Daniel Horner, and, you know, some of these guys that are at the top of the game and can teach it and show you where those 30 seconds are coming from. And the thing that's amazing is those 30 seconds are not coming from shooting fast. They're coming from what you're doing when you're not shooting. And that's something that you just can't pick up on your own going to match after match after match. It's something you have to practice and repeat and, you know, go through. The shooting is important. Don't get me wrong. You have to shoot fast and you have to shoot accurately quickly, right? But Joe today at the workshop that we were doing here, we did his level 2 workshop, which is a great warm up, right? What a great way to get some practice in right before you shoot a match. But he said something that was really kind of impacted me today and was the big takeaway for the day. He said, you know, don't shoot faster, shoot sooner. Which meant if I can get to that next shooting position, or I can get my gun up as I'm coming into that shooting position, and I start shooting a second before you do, and I do that on every, you know, position in a stage, I'm already 5 seconds ahead of you, right? And it's the little things like that are so important that, I mean, it becomes so critical, I think, for new shooters to see these things early on before they develop bad habits, and to really get the training, get with people, you know, by all means, go to the match, ask the other shooters what's up. I mean, it's, you know, there's so much out there with gear and equipment and, as a sponsored shooter, obviously, we want to highlight the gear and equipment that we're sponsored with. And, you ask 10 different people what shoe's the best shoe, you're going to get 10 different answers. It's just, it's the reality of it. But there are some things that you just start, you start picking up on, and you see that everybody's using it or everybody's doing it. I mean, it's not a mistake that, you go to any match and 80% of the scopes on the rifles are Vortex Razor 1-6. There's a reason, right? I mean, that's not that's not an accident. There's a reason that 70% of the shotguns out there are Benelli M2s,
right?
And as a new shooter, you should probably take note of that. And even if you're not, shooting the best gear yet, at least be paying attention to what other people are doing and ask questions. And, I mean, little things like, what pants are you wearing? I mean, the stuff that we're getting from Vertex right now is cutting edge. It's just crazy. And, little things that'll make a difference, right? I mean, you're shooting down here in South Texas in June and July. What pants you're wearing starts to make a difference, right? What shoes you're wearing starts to make a difference.
Absolutely.
What gear you're carrying, how reliable is your stuff? So, it's an interesting game. And one of the things I love about 3-gun is it's like an onion, right? I mean, you there's always something else to learn, and there's always something else to improve on. There's always some other technique. I mean, when I first started 3-gun, we loaded out of the old style caddies, right? And
right.
You loaded one shell at a time, but you held 4 shells in your hand. And man, the learning curve on doing that was so steep and so long. And then somebody came along and they're like, "Hey, check this out. I just loaded 2 at one time." And I mean, like the freaking world came apart. People were like, "What? Right. Dude, that's crazy. How are you doing that?" So now everybody was doing, strong side, loading 2. And then somebody came out and they're like, "Well, check this out. I can do it with 4."
Quad load.
And you just, that kind of innovation that comes out of that competitiveness, and it's out there for the newer folks, but, they got to be willing to ask questions. They got to be willing. Like I said, once you get some of the fundamental stuff down, you can do a lot with that. But I would encourage people to really consider going out and getting the training. Talk to people at the game and ask them where they're getting their training, where are they learning from, who's out there that's really teaching this stuff and teaching it well, and then spend a little bit of money, because for basically the cost of an entry fee for one major match, you could spend 2 days with some of these trainers and really up your game and take yourself to another level, so that the next time you go to a match, you are competitive.
Yeah, but I'm going to also say, if you think you can go out there with junk gear, it ain't going to happen.
Not for very long. I mean, there's I won't mention the brand of the shotgun, but it was a very popular one because it was very cheap. And I bought it, and after it crapped out on me 3 matches in a row, that thing was dismantled and thrown in a heap, and I went out and got a Benelli M2, right? Because
and I'm not just talking about guns either. I'm talking about everything: belts, holsters, magazine pouches. It just, if you think you can go out there and be competitive with cheap stuff, it ain't going to happen. And I learned that the hard way myself. I'll just put that out there, but I did spend a little bit of money, and the stuff I got worked out a whole lot better. Just saying. And not just the guns, but the gear.
All of it, right? I mean, and there's so much innovation that comes from competition. And
absolutely.
One of the things that I encourage people to do, it's kind of funny, because as a sponsored shooter, you'll get people who, look at you and they're like, "Oh man, this guy's sponsored shooter. He must be, the best shooter in the world." And that's not necessarily the case.
That's not true.
You're an advocate for that company. You're an advocate for that product. If you're, in my opinion, if you're doing it right. Every single sponsor that I've got, I was a customer first, right?
Amen.
I spent my hard-earned money I couldn't even tell you how many Vortex scopes I bought before I picked Vortex up as a sponsor, right?
And I would say the same thing is true about Jason. You know, I was hoping he would get on here tonight. He isn't here, but same thing. I mean, if you look at every single sponsor he has, the stuff he uses from them is stuff he believes in because it worked.
Well, and, you know, believes into the point that, like I said, I was a customer first.
Yeah.
You know, I got picked up by Weber Tactical here for this season, but I got picked up in the middle of last season, and it wasn't even that I got picked up. I called up Adam, who is a former law enforcement officer, and you know, I said, "Hey, Adam, I mean, some of the stuff you're putting out there is really pretty cool stuff." And I just saw the new holster that you are putting out because my buddy Nick Miller was sponsored by Weber Tactical, and I called Adam up and I said, "When's it drop? Because I want one as soon as it comes out. Here's my credit card. Just whenever it comes out, just ship it to me." Right. So I bought the whole setup and had the whole setup. Wasn't even using it in competition, right? Because I was, it's one of the things that I will do. I mean, I will practice with something for 6 months before I ever put it out on the range. And so I was practicing with his gear and really liked his gear. And we got to talking, and, you know, I told him, I said, "Look, I really like what you got going on. I want, you know, I want to promote your products. Is it all right if I put your logo on my jersey and, you know, tag you in some Instagram posts and whatnot?" And Adam was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. But, you know, you've already bought the gear. I don't know what to get you as a sponsor." I was like, "You know, it's not about that. It's about being able to promote the best equipment that's out there."
Amen.
And, you know, over the years, that relationship builds as a sponsored shooter. And there are things that get done, you know, for you as a shooter, of course, to compensate you for that. But the thing is that there's so much good stuff out there now that, you know, has come because of the competition. Weber's stuff is bomb proof. And I mean, his mag holders, I mean, you stand on your freaking head, right? Jump up and down. It's not coming out of there. It's just not.
Yeah.
And, you know, he, again, really innovative in how he builds these things and runs his company. And, you know, so it's like you said, I mean, go look and see, what is everybody using, right? I mean,
sure.
what gear is everyone using? And talk to them and ask them, why are you going with that holster, right? Why are you using that holster and not something else? And boy, that's a hard lesson to learn, right? I mean,
amen.
You know, getting DQ'd at a match because your holster is something you don't forget. And
yeah, I'll say something else because you were talking about Vortex. I own a ton of Vortex optics, and I'm going to tell you straight up, for the money, they are quality. The Vortex Venom, just for a dot sight on a handgun, is phenomenal. I love the Vortex Venom, and I've probably got, at least 10 or 12 of their optics.
Oh yeah,
and they're good stuff, and they're well priced.
And
I mean, they're not, you know, and I'm not going to knock on Leopold and some of the others out there, but, you know, Vortex glass for the money, top notch. I love it.
It really is. And, you know, the way that they back their products, and, you know, what really got me over to Vortex in the first place and really looking at them was their military and law enforcement program. The way that they treat, you know, our veterans and law enforcement as a top priority. And, you know, my son shoots some 3-gun with me. We used to shoot together a lot, and he was rough on equipment, man. I mean, he would break a brick. That kid is amazing. And, you know, he had a little Vortex 1-4 PST when they used to have the illumination knob up on the side of the scope.
On the side, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, he broke it off, throwing it in dumping it in a barrel. And so I sent the scope back, and they sent one, you know, repaired it, got it back to me really quickly. And we went to a match the very next weekend. And I'm like, "What is your deal, dude? I mean, you're freaking killing me here." So I'm like, now I'm embarrassed, right? So I send the scope in again with a real apologetic note, and they sent it back, and they're just like, no problem. Right. You know, I mean, they got it right back to me. And, you know, to their credit, the next version of the PST that came out didn't have that on there, right? So they recognize, hey, there's a problem here, and they got it fixed. And it's just, companies like Vortex, companies like, Vertex, the gear that they are putting out now that is, kind of really understated. I mean, back when I first started in 3-gun, you basically got a pair of BDUs, right? And you had these baggy pants and these gigantic ass pockets everywhere. And the stuff that's coming out now, is good looking stuff.
Tactical clothing.
Yeah.
511, proper, true spec. I could go on and on. I know I own a bunch of it right now.
they're all really stepping that game up.
Yeah. So, absolutely. Absolutely. And just talking about equipment now, go ahead and run down your shotgun, your rifle, and your handgun setup for heavy.
So my heavy setup, we'll start with the rifle. I'm really kind of particular about my rifles, right? I build my own rifles. I've done that for years. I find, some pleasure and enjoyment in building and tuning a rifle precisely for whatever the purpose is, right? I'm big on purpose built. So, my rifle that I built for heavy division is of course, a 308. And I built it on a Zev upper and lower. Zev took over for, they actually bought Mega, with the old Mega Arms Company.
Okay.
And when they did that, they released an upper lower that was very, very lightweight. It was a project that Mega had, and I had actually been in negotiations with Mega for sponsorship when they were bought out by Zev. So, I was like, well, there goes that. Well, I met the guys from Zev at SHOT Show, and we got to talking, and they showed me this upper and lower, and I was like, oh, man, I love that. Let's get that. So they sent me one, and I started there. Then I went and I picked up a titanium bolt carrier group from Rubber City, which was, again, Jay, right? I mean, and this would be a good place to just kind of point out that, look, if somebody like Jay Carrillo is running a Rubber City bolt carrier group, there's probably a reason, right? I mean, the dude is not going to run crappy equipment that's going to, run out on him or break. So, I called Jay up and I was like, tell me a little bit about, because I'm kind of looking at this titanium bolt carrier group, and we talked, and, and I pulled the trigger and I bought it. And, to me, that's exactly what sponsorship is all about, right? So he's a great advocate, and I saw that he was running the gear, so I bought this bolt carrier group. Loved it. The bolt itself is a JP. I love JP stuff. They've done a ton for the sport. Great company. And man, I'll tell you what, I have tried and tried and tried and have never been able to break any of their gear. It's just, I don't know what they make that stuff out of or what planet they went to get the metal they make their bolts out of, but their bolts just don't quit. I mean, I've got one bolt in a 308 that's got probably close to 80,000 rounds on it. And, a 308's a pretty heavy hitting,
yes, it is.
Piece of equipment. You're putting 80,000 rounds on one bolt. And I mean, I take that thing out and I inspect it and I clean it. And when I clean it up, you couldn't tell it from a new bolt. I mean, it's just crazy. So, it's got the titanium bolt carrier group. It's got a JP bolt, a JP captured buffer. And then and this again comes down to, sponsorship. Nick Miller is sponsored by Falcor, which also owns Dracos, which is a barrel that I absolutely love. The Dracos barrel is, it's a 308 barrel. It's a, sub MOA barrel. They machine it down to a very, very thin profile. They put an aluminum sleeve over it, and then they fill the void between the sleeve and the barrel itself with a polymer that is infused with some secret magic dust. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that, because this company is a company that is actually they build a lot of high-end aerospace military defense contract business. And so they fill that void with this polymer that stiffens the barrel back up and acts as a heat sink to the point that the barrel temperature itself never goes above probably like 170 degrees. I mean, it's just crazy. I don't care how fast you shoot, your barrel temperature and your chamber temperature never goes above, like 170, 180 degrees. They've got a bunch of studies out on this stuff. What that does is your point of impact doesn't change as the barrel heats up, right? Nice. And because it's so much stiffer, you don't get the barrel flip and harmonics that you do on, some of the thinner barrels that really start getting affected with the volume of fire that we use in 3-gun. So it's an ideal barrel for 3-gun and allowed me to cut my barrel length down to 13.5 inches with a pin and welded, comp that I've got on there from, I think I've got the comp from, I can't remember which one it is right now, but it's pinned and welded. So, the full length obviously is the 16-inch length, but that barrel is so much shorter. It allows me to maneuver a lot better in some of the tight base stages. And I was a little bit concerned about it giving up accuracy at distance. Those concerns were put to rest last year when I went to the He-Man competition in Raton, New Mexico, where, you're shooting out to 600, 650, 700 yards in competition on the clock, and it's all heavy gun shooters, right? Everybody there is a heavy shooter, and they have out there. I don't know if you've ever been to the NRA Whittington Center, but they've got this buffalo that's up on a hill, white steel, target shaped like a buffalo at 1,100 yards, 1,124 yards. Huh. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. So I kind of, got on my app and I took a look and I did some calculations and all right, I'm going to try this out. So I got on the scope and fired off a round, had enough time. All right. The bullet flight was long enough that I had time to shoot the rifle, set the rifle down, pick up my binoculars, and then see the shot and see the impact, right? And I know, saw the impact. I was like, okay, so that was low and left a little bit. So we're picking up a little bit of wind, and I need to be a little bit higher. And I kid you not, the next 3 shots out of this 13.5-inch barrel hit that target at over 1,100 yards.
Nice.
That shouldn't even happen. I called Colonel Orr, Alan Orr from Orr Tactical, who builds all of my ammo for me, and has become like kind of one of the go-to sources for ammo in Texas for 3-gunners. This guy knows more about ammunition. He's forgotten more about ammunition than most of us will ever know. And I called Alan up and I was like, you're not going to believe what I just did. And I probably shouldn't even be telling this story because Alan's like, well, don't publicize that because it shouldn't be able to do that. and I told him, I was like, Alan, I didn't hit that thing once. I hit it 3 times. He goes, Bill, with a 13.5-inch barrel, and he does the calculation in his head. And he's like, your velocity when you hit there was not just subsonic. He's like, it probably barely scratched the paint. And I'm like, I saw the hits. He's like, that's amazing. But so, this Dracos barrel has just been phenomenal. And of course, the entire rifle is topped off with a Vortex 1-6.
Sure.
It's the new Vortex Razor E, which is significantly lighter than the original Vortex Razor. So, all told, the rifle with the, titanium bolt carrier group, 13.5-inch barrel, I've got a Luth AR stock on it. So very, very lightweight rifle. The entire rifle, empty with the optic on it probably comes in at about maybe 7.5 pounds, which for a 308 is very
that's very light.
And
for a 308.
Yeah, and very, very fast. The Dracos barrel is unique in the gas block that it's got on it adjusts the dwell. It's not the volume of gas, but the dwell.
Right.
So you couple that with a gas key on the bolt carrier group, and with the JP captured buffer, I was able to tune that thing, just get it down to where it was. It's like a sewing machine. It's just amazing. People shoot it and they're like, I can't believe that's 308. So that's where my rifle setup is.
So shotgun
setup was built for me by Briley, and Briley had built me a shotgun for practical, right? My M2. So Briley started with the Benelli platform, and did a bunch of work to it. They have a proprietary trigger that makes, I'm not kidding you, I wish my first rifle had a trigger as nice as the shotgun trigger. I mean, it's just amazing the work that they do on their trigger system. Has the AES, trigger guard. They've got their trigger in it. And so they did a bunch of work on the internals, carbon tube.
Yeah.
It's got,
how many shot tube do you use?
So it's a 12 round.
12 round. Okay.
12 round tube, but it has a 2-round extension on it. So it'll hold up to 14. So when I went to Briley and I said, look, I'm going to start shooting a bunch of heavy division. I need a heavy division shotgun. And, I was expecting them to say, okay, well, let's go with the Benelli again and build you a pump action shotgun. And what Claudio, who he's been a gunsmith there for years. In fact, Claudio did a lot of the gunsmithing on, really well-known guns and really well-known people back in the day, Rob Latham and Enos and these guys.
Rob,
Claudio and this guy's been gunsmithing for, longer than most people have been around. And so I asked him, I said, I want a heavy shotgun. And he goes, we can do the Benelli, he said, but there are some problems that I see consistently out of the Benelli pump guns that you're not going to see if you go with the Remington 870, which surprised me. I was like, really? Nobody shoots the 870 that I know of in heavy. And he said, well, the problem with it is for them, it's got a steel receiver, right? So it's not like you're going to take a Dremel tool and really be able to work out your loading port on this steel receiver. You need high-end milling equipment. So they built me this awesome shotgun. I mean,
I saw it.
You saw it. That's right.
I saw it.
It's so smooth, right? They polished all the internals. Basically they built the ideal heavy division gun, right? And I mean, polished internals, Magpul furniture, Cerakoted the receiver and the barrel because, again, it's a steel receiver, so you don't want any issues there. And put their proprietary adjustable rear sight for slugs on it, right?
Yeah.
And so this shotgun has everything that you could possibly imagine from a great company like Briley. And they built this thing out, and I was amazed at it. I mean, it's very, very smooth. It's very fast. It's easy to load. And more people have asked me about that shotgun probably than any other piece of equipment that I've got because it's unique, right? I mean, it stands out. People see it and they're like, wow, nobody shoots an 870. Well, this last year at the He-Man Nationals, I started seeing some guys who were shooting the Benellis, the year before, had switched over to the 870. And so Briley started picking up a lot of business from guys that were seeing my 870 out in the field who were trying to make the switch themselves, but were having trouble getting the gun running right or were having trouble getting it to where they could load it. And they saw the work that Briley did on that, and they were like, all of a sudden, Claudio calls me. He's like, man, we got another call. We've got some guy out in Utah wants to send us a shotgun. Some guy over in New Mexico wants to send us a shotgun. And so they've really started building these 870s that are just, that 870 platform is such a solid bomb-proof platform.
Yeah, well, I use the Remington 870 quite a bit in the military, a little bit different than probably that one, but great breaching tool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it always works, right? I mean,
absolutely. Bomb-proof, like you said, bomb-proof. Pump and lightweight.
Yeah, just easy handling and a great it's a great shotgun for our game, and and it's very reliable. And Briley's done a phenomenal job of, they'll take a project, and again, it just kind of comes back to what I said earlier with Briley. They're willing to take this and say, okay, you're on the cutting edge. You're our race car driver, right? Tell us what's working for you. And then we will build a package for the guy who wants to take an 870 duck hunting, but wants to make sure that it's going to run every time and it's going to cycle every time and it's going to be easy to load. And they take that information back and they put it into production on their own guns, and they're building some really cool stuff there. So, once again, like I said, just they're great company, and they don't take the fact that they're a big corporation and say, well, we don't have time for you. right? I mean, these guys are there.
Yeah.
I drive down there tomorrow, and they'd be like, "Hey, come on back. Let's talk. Let's see what you got going on."
Well, and I'll say this is a personal observation. Back in September, I mean, your slug shooting out of that gun was freaking dead accurate.
You know, and that used to be one of my problem areas, right? I mean, I used to struggle with slugs, and when they put they've got a proprietary rear sight that is, it's crazy. They machine it into the rib, right? So it sits flat. After one or two practice sessions, you don't even see the thing when you're shooting, shotgun targets, right? Knockdowns and clays.
Yeah.
But when it comes time to really zero in on a slug, this sight's completely adjustable, right? So you go out. We were zeroing our slugs today, and some of the guys were struggling a little bit, and the adjustable sight's like any other adjustable sight. You're hitting a little left. Well, let's move that point of impact to the right. Sure. And man, that took my slug game to a whole nother level. Having the ability to have that sight right there. It's solid. It's low profile. It doesn't get in the way when you're, dumping the shotgun in a barrel.
Right.
It doesn't stand in your way when you're shooting clay targets or knockdowns. But when it's time to deliver that 100-yard slug shot,
sure,
I'll tell you what, that thing is phenomenal. And it made all the difference for me and really took my slug game to where now, it's rare that I'm missing a slug shot.
Sure. And go to your handgun now, because you shoot heavy, so you've got to have a higher caliber.
Right. So 45 is typically the minimum caliber for a heavy division pistol. And, this is where it kind of gets interesting. A lot of guys will just shoot, whatever 1911 they've got sitting around. And that's great. That's, there's nothing wrong with that. The 1911 has been a formidable, weapon for 150 years, right? I mean, a friggin' thing is just, it's bomb proof. And when I first started shooting heavy division, I shot a Wilson Combat X-Tac. It's a great gun. I love that gun.
Yep.
But an opportunity came around when Jesse Tischhauser started, getting out of the game, and he had shot some heavy, and he had a Infinity 45 that he had custom built for heavy division, and he shot it a little bit, but he said it just sat in his safe, and it came up and it came available, and I snatched it up. I mean, I didn't even hesitate. Jesse hardly had a chance to post the thing, and I was on it. I was like, no, I'll just take it. I don't even, name your price kind of thing. And man, I'll tell you what, when I started shooting, and I'm not sponsored by Infinity yet. Okay.
Yeah.
But I've got I have 6 Infinity firearms since buying my first one from Jesse, and the first one that I bought was that 45. I took that thing out, and I'm telling you, it was astonishing to me how different, on what a completely different level that firearm is engineered. And the way that engineering translates into shooting mechanics blew me away. It is an absolute joy to shoot that thing. And when I coupled it with, again, I mentioned earlier, Orr Tactical down here in Texas, run by Alan Orr, who's a retired Marine Corps colonel who, when he got out of the Marines, he was like, well, now what am I going to do? And he started doing some research, and he said, you know what? I'm going to build ammo. He builds the best ammo anywhere that I've ever seen. I went to him, I said, hey, I'm shooting heavy division, and everything that's out there was basically military 230 grain ball, right?
Sure.
Which is pretty hot.
Yep.
And, you're moving a 230 grain piece of lead at 900 or 1100 feet per second. Man, that's a lot to manage when you've got 15 targets to deal with, right?
Yep.
So, Alan was like, yeah, we can work with that. So he started building a heavy division specific 45 caliber round that is the softest shooting and just dead nuts accurate. And it's kind of funny because it moves slow enough that, in fact, Nick and I we shot a 3-gun match, a local match up at North Texas Multi-Gun, which is Jeremy Moore's club. And Jeremy does the Vortex Shooter Source 3-gun match that if you ever get a chance to come down, that is a phenomenal match. They've got openings right now. It's open for registration. I can't believe that match doesn't sell out year after year after year within the first hour. I mean, it is such a good match. And the thing about Jeremy is he runs the same quality match, whether it's a major or a weekend match for the club. I mean, the guy is just one of the best match directors in the country. And we were up there and we ran a weekend match. And I mean, it was challenging. These were long pistol shots. And Nick was standing behind me. And at Jeremy's monthly matches, you can coach, right? So you can call shots for people.
Sure.
And Nick was standing behind me and he's calling my pistol shots. And I'm like, how the hell? I mean, there's no splash, right? And he's like, you're left. And I'm like, well, how do you know I'm left? There's no splash or anything. He's like, I could see the bullet. Like literally, you can see this thing because it's a big 230 grain softball, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But he's like, you can see the arc, you can see the bullet going all the way into the target. And he was, and Nick was even saying, he's like, man, it's so consistent. I mean, they just puts it in the same spot every single time because the ammo that he built. So that combination of, of absolutely amazing pistol. If you ever have an opportunity to shoot an infinity pistol, it's I just can't describe the difference that it makes shooting a pistol that is that refined and is that consistent and the connection that it makes to you. I mean, in a fast stage, I'm not consciously aware of the trigger, right? I mean, I'll see the sight picture and the round goes off. It's crazy. I mean, it's like the gun communicates with your brain. So that's the pistol that I use. And in fact, speaking of Claudio down at Briley, since I had 6 Infinities sitting around, 5 of them are 9mm, I was like, you know what? If I ever need to, get this one worked on or, it's starting to build up a lot of rounds on it. Probably needs to go back to Infinity for a tune-up. They do a great job of cleaning them up and refurbishing them down there. But I was like, I'm stuck, right? Because I only have the one. So I called Claudio up and I was like, hey, I want to do a caliber conversion on this thing. So he was like, yeah, absolutely, bring it down. So here I've got now 2, and he just called me today. He's like, your gun's ready. So now I've got 2 of these Infinities in 45, and are they expensive? Yeah, they are. Are they worth it? Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when you do this as much as I do, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
Exactly. Out there as much as I am.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. No, I get it. What magazine capacity?
So this is kind of a hotly debated topic here in the heavy division, right? Because most of the heavy division matches out there limit you to 10 rounds.
Right.
Right. And the idea there, I think, is to, allow the guy who has an old Colt 45 sitting in a safe somewhere to get a couple of 10-round extended mags and be able to come out and play the game. And I get that.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
There are guys out there who just, they insist that is true heavy. It's 10 rounds in the pistol, it's 20 rounds in the rifle, and it's a pump action shotgun. And if it's anything else, it's not heavy division, right? To them, they can't stand that. Pete Rensing comes out, in UML, and he's like, well, maybe we want to mix things up a little bit. So one of the things that I've been working with Pete on is, let's get the magazine capacity restriction lifted on 45s, right? And there's some magazines out there now, MBX, which I'm not sponsored by, but they make great products. They have an 18-round.
Whoa.
Yeah, 45. I have 3 of their mags, and I'm just waiting. I'm like, Pete, I got the mags. I'm ready to go, man. I mean, let's get this done. Because, it would change it would change the game a little bit.
Sure.
But the thing that it does is there's nothing worse than being a heavy division shooter, right?
Yeah.
In a match where the match director is setting this up for practical and open.
Right.
Right. Where, you guys shooting open. I mean, it's Freaking
Yeah, yeah, no, I
magazine
know.
with a
You
needle
got,
on the
yeah,
bottom of it,
yeah,
right? I mean, you
yeah,
got
I know
magazines
exactly
that
what
are,
you mean. Yeah.
yeah. And so you might have a pistol stage, right? Or a pistol rifle stage where you might have 30 targets, of pistol. And then you get into it and you got 15 or 20 paper targets you got to take and then some long range stuff. I mean, you're going to need a wheelbarrow to carry all that crap if
Sure.
you're shooting heavy division,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And so being able to increase the mag capacity for those that want to be able to do it and are shooting double stack 45s, 18 rounds in a 45 isn't that far off of the 25 rounds you're shooting in a practical pistol.
Right.
So you're reducing the amount of mag changes, and I get that there are guys
Yeah.
out there who say that that's changing the game, and I for one, I'm like, well, so what, right?
So what? Exactly.
But their concern again is, then you turn heavy division into practical, which has become a little bit of an arms race and whatnot.
Well, I'll be brutally honest. When I broke into USPSA, the first division I shot in was limited 10 with Wilson Combat 10 round 45 major power factor in my Springfield range officer. But I'll say this, that doggone Springfield was deadly accurate.
Sure.
Now, granted, there's no way I'm going to compete with people in open or carry optics, etc. division, but within the confines of that, with 10 rounds and that particular pistol with iron sights, brutally accurate. I mean, I hits out the ass.
Right.
But the speed wise, because you got to make all the magazine changes, again, you're not going to be competitive with guys in open, etc. division.
And the thing is, in USPSA, and I shoot limited 10 in USPSA, mostly for practice.
Sure.
If there's not a match that weekend, I may as well go shoot some pistol stuff because pistol, obviously, the skill that deteriorates the quickest.
Well, that's something I want to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
Of the three disciplines, rifle, shotgun, handgun, and I asked Jason this same question. In your opinion, which one is the toughest to master?
The easy answer is pistol because it requires, I think, the most concentrated skills and the most concentrated fundamentals, right? I mean, in fact, we were just talking about this at the Joe Farewell seminar that, if you can get the fundamentals on pistol, then everything else just kind of falls into place with pistol, right? I mean, it's about, trigger control. It's about, your grip, and it's about your stance and your breathing.
Sure.
If you can get those down, it doesn't matter what the presentation is, whether you're hitting targets on the move, whether you're, hitting long 100-yard targets or 70-yard targets, which Jeremy loves to do up there at North Texas. The fundamentals are the fundamentals. But the thing about it is that with pistol is probably the least persistent skill because it deteriorates very rapidly. If you don't practice it, it goes away.
Sure.
And you know that. But I'll tell you, I think the one that is the hardest to master is long range rifle.
Interesting.
And that's the one where, long range rifle is kind of it's the separator in a lot of matches, right? You'll see guys kind of neck and neck, and there'll be a group of them that are really kind of hanging together and doing really well in the base stages, and everybody's within 3 or 4 seconds of each other. And then somebody will come out and just blow it away on the long range, and nobody can catch up to them, right? Because in the long range, it becomes one of these things where, and something that I've really tried to work on in my own game is not to shoot fastest, but to shoot the least. Because
don't waste rounds.
Shot on a long range target is, 1 to 2 seconds of time on a makeup shot, right?
Yep.
So if you take a half a second more to really let your sights settle and you break that shot and you're on to the next one, you just saved a second. Instead of just cranking round after round after round, hoping that something's going to hit it.
Yeah. Now, see, and this is what I love because your answer, my answer, and his answer, three different perspectives and three completely different answers, but for different reasons. Now, Jay said pistol was the hardest discipline to master. Now, for me in 3-gun, shooting my Sig Sauer P320X5, pistol was easy. I mean, I probably in the Mission 22 might have missed a grand total of 3 to 5 shots. For me, the answer was shotgun, but not because of the accuracy, but because of the loading, because I'm in factory division and the reloading is the limiter. And in your position, your perspective, you say the long-range rifle. But that's what I love about this sport, because you get three totally different perspectives, but for different reasons.
Right. And what that shows you is why people are so attracted to the game of 3-gun. There's
Absolutely
so much to it. There's so much depth to it. If you're a USPSA shooter and your goal is to be, a master, grandmaster, there's a lot in that desire. There's a lot in that skill set that has to be developed there. The footwork, obviously the accuracy, the speed.
Yeah. Well,
all of those things have to be developed, but it's on one platform. Right.
And to me, when you talk about USPSA, and this is something one of my ancestors, Wyatt Earp, made the famous comment, fast is fine, accuracy is final. But in my point is, if it's fast enough, like Rob Latham said. And I watched the top USPSA shooters, and to me, the biggest single difference I notice is trigger manipulation and their ability to hold the gun steady. And they say, oh, well, you can't yank the trigger. Well, no, bullshit. If you're firing fast, you're going to yank the fucking trigger. You're good, but you got to be able to hold the gun steady. Yep. And that is the biggest difference between guys who can pull that trigger. Like I've seen YouTube videos of JJ Ricazza, and his pistol sounds like a machine gun.
Yep.
And that gun doesn't move. I mean, he's spitting out 2-round groups that are, a half an inch to an inch apart at speeds that are unimaginable, and that gun ain't moving in his hand.
Well, and you look at, and it goes back. There's so much history in the pistol shooting sports that, there's a lot of guys out there who have really laid down how to do it and how to do it right for so many years, and when Latham came out and said that, aiming doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's right.
No, I say, absolutely.
But he had built a reputation that he could stand on that and he could defend that. Enos in his book, he talks a lot about, the mechanics of the trigger and how you're going to manipulate the gun and how you're going to manipulate the trigger. And, it's kind of funny. I mean, there's so much detail and there's so much that you can go into on pistol. So, I would agree with Jay from that perspective that there's to become a top level pistol shooter requires an enormous amount of investment of time and energy and effort and ammunition. And being a top level pistol shooter is a definitive advantage in 3-gun. But the thing is, it's not necessarily going to win you a match, right? Because you could be a top tier pistol shooter and the match could have some pretty straightforward pistols targets in a stage or in the whole match. And it doesn't really require a whole lot of the finer points and the finer skills that you gain as a USPSA shooter.
Exactly.
And then, now all of a sudden you've got to replicate a lot of that with the rifle, which is a completely, it's the same footwork, but it's a different game. And then you've got to turn right around and, like you said, you've got to be able to load the shotgun. You've got to be able to shoot the shotgun, and the thing with shotgun is that every shot is a high value target, right? Because you're only carrying so much ammo.
Absolutely.
And you only have so much room in the gun, right? So unless you shoot open, you're probably looking at, 12, maybe 14 rounds that you can stuff into that gun at any one time. And it takes, comparatively longer to do that than it does with the pistol or the rifle. So every shot's got to count. And if the one place you can't afford to get sloppy is with the shotgun, right? Because
oh,
pistol,
absolutely,
I get a little sloppy, and I slap the trigger, and well, fine. I mean, there's another shot right behind it. I got 25 of them right here in this little box in the gun.
I found, and like I said before, last year, because we were on the same squad in that Mission 22 multi-gun, a lot of the targets, the pistol targets, I only fired one round at because I knew I was going to hit dead center. I didn't have to fire 2 rounds.
Right.
At certain ranges. Obviously, you don't have to put, you want to have 2 rounds on paper, but if I know positively I can put 1 round in that circle, I don't have to fire that second round. But like you said, with the shotgun, particularly high value targets and the limited loading space, again, unless you're shooting open, you've got magazines that are holding 20 and 30 shotgun rounds. But me in factory division, I got what's on my belt, and I'm sitting here having to run and try and shovel rounds into that doggone receiver. That is not easy. Now, granted, there are some guys on YouTube that make it look easy, but I can tell you from experience, first time I went out there and tried it, it was not easy. And I'm throwing crap all over the ground and saying, yeah, something I probably need to practice on a little bit more.
4 or 5 years ago, I would have said that shotgun was probably the separator in this game, right? It's what separated the top 5% or 10% of shooters from everybody else. Because, if you've ever seen Daniel Horner load out of a caddy, it was ridiculous. I mean, the guy put 4 rounds in the shotgun on the run in 4 seconds, and that was just unheard of back then. I mean, it was just, he was so quick at it. And that was a skill set that took hours and hours of practice. In fact,
I saw Jerry Micklick too, who just,
Sure, and Jerry running open, he had the advantage. He used the stick loaders back then.
Yeah,
but
the stick loaders, right?
He still does. It's amazing how fast that guy will load. But I remember seeing Horner on some videos and seeing some guys, and I was like, well, I need to learn to do that. So I can remember one of the very first major matches I ever shot was a Fallen Brethren match up in North Texas. And, man, I trained my ass off for that match. And I was practicing my reloads and doing the old way of, the holding the shotgun here and bringing those rounds up and just that constant repetition. And I remember practicing 2 hours a day, every single day for a month. And to the point that I developed tendonitis in my elbows from practicing so much to try to get that skill. And I still, it was almost impossible. It was like something I was like, how in the world? I could never get below, 5 seconds of loading 4 rounds. And half the time, more than half the time, I was just dropping shit on the floor. I mean, it was,
oh no, I would hey, I hear you.
And it was such a huge separation because it was a barrier to entry, really. I mean, it was such a difficult skill to master.
Yeah.
And when people started dropping deuces and they started quad loading, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try that. And I kid you not, within 15 minutes, I was doing load 2s like nothing. Right. I mean, it was just, I was like, why the hell was this not around 2 years ago? Right. And then so I picked up quad loading and, maybe a couple of days, right, to where I was getting to where I was fairly competent. And, within a week of practicing maybe an hour a day, I was to where I could get the job done, and then, of course, you practice more and build that skill. But nowadays, just about anybody who's putting in a little bit of time can quad load well enough that the shotgun is no longer the separator that it used to be.
Yeah, well, I've gotten to the point I can do twins. I do strong hand, just better. I tried weak hand. That was a disaster. Though Jay loads weak hand, and he's fast as hell at it. I mean, he's very, very fast. I'm in twins. I'm not quite at quads yet, but again, like you said, you got to practice. Once and that's what'll make the difference.
Well, it's that's the one thing that makes the difference in this game, just like any other. The amount of time that you put in and the quality of the time that you put in. I used to, man, I mean, it was nothing for me to spend 2 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week, in the evenings, running around my office, dry firing at stuff and setting up drills. And, I even had a big barrel out back, and we would practice transitions and dumps and, dumping the shotgun, dumping the rifle. We got a bunch of airsoft stuff one year and used the airsoft stuff. And that was actually a really great way, especially in the winter, to, actually get some feedback on your dry fire, right? So you could kind of feel and see how it was going.
Sure.
I've got the laser setups where I can dry fire and actually see where I'm hitting. That was an eye opener, because now all of a sudden, you're thinking that you're not slapping the trigger, and all of a sudden you start realizing, well, every time that laser goes off, you're off the freaking target there, hero. Yep. You better fix something. So, I think that's one area where new shooters just, I don't know what the aversion is to spending the time doing the dry fire, right? That is the most efficient way to build the fundamentals. You still got to get out on the range, because you still got to be able to show that you can do it and do it, in an environment where it counts, which is, breaking that trigger and having a shot go off. But there's so much basic fundamental foundational work that can and should be done before you ever fire a single live shot. And, there's some guys out there, Ravin Perry, Ravin was huge in 3-gun a few years back. And, he kind of dropped off the scene there, got busy. He came out and shot the tactical games with us here last month. And, man, that guy's dry fire routine was just insane. And it was every day. And I remember 3-Gun Nation did an interview with him in their magazine, and they were like, well, how often do you get on the range? And Ravin was like, well, I really don't get on the range that much. Which blew me away. I was like, here this guy came on the scene. He just burst on the scene. And, he's a USPSA grandmaster. He's just a great shooter, very athletic. And he bursts on the scene in 3-gun, and he's just kicking ass and taking names. And then he reveals in this interview that he really doesn't spend that much time on the range. And so the interviewer asked him, well, what are you doing? And he gave, in that interview, he described his dry fire routine. And, here's a guy who was spending an hour to 2 hours a day, every single day, going through this dry fire routine 7 days a week, and maybe getting out on the range once every 2 to 3 weeks, for live fire. And he was just crushing it. And it really showed me that, people will poo-poo dry firing, and they'll say, well, it doesn't replace. And it's true, it doesn't necessarily replace it, but it builds those neural pathways to where the habits are there, right? You're seeing things. Lan and Michael a couple years ago, before Dissonant Arms really took off. Those two guys are so busy now they can't hardly get out to that. But back before all of that, they said, you know what, we're gonna do 52,000 rounds in a year. That was their goal. They were going to do 52,000 pistol rounds in a year. And so their idea was we're going to practice 1,000 live fire rounds a week for 52 weeks. And one of the things that stuck out to me, and it was, Lan, who shoots practical division, he was like, we got to about 10,000 rounds, about 10 weeks into this. And I realized that I hadn't really seen my front sight until I had fired 10,000 rounds. And, I started thinking about that, and I was like, that's amazing. What do you mean? I've seen my front sight. He goes, no, you haven't. You look at it, but you haven't seen it. And, so I kind of started doing the same thing, and I put a bunch of rounds through, 2-3 years ago, and it's true. You get to about 10,000 repetitions, and all of a sudden things start to clarify themselves, and you start noticing things, and you start, sensing some things. And there's a book that I read right after that called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And in that book, Malcolm Gladwell talks about, the requirement to reach mastery of any skill is 10,000 repetitions. And, you start thinking about it. Well, have you drawn from the holster 10,000 times? Have you, come up on the draw and broke the shot while focusing on, the target and your breathing and your reset and focus on all those things? Have you done that 10,000 times? And if you haven't, you're not a master at it yet, right? And it's that repetition. Well, even if you got a lot of money, 10,000 repetitions is going to cost you a lot of ammo, right? That's 10,000 rounds right there. And I know how much that is. I mean, I just went down to War Tactical last week, and I was like, hey, Alan, I need to pick up 10,000. I mean, I bought 10,000 rounds right there, from Alan of 45 and 9mm, because, it's an important part of the training. But that 10,000 rounds doesn't have to be live fire.
Right.
I mean, when I told you earlier that when I picked up the sponsorship with Weber Tactical, I literally would not put that holster on my belt and go compete with it until I had drawn from that holster 10,000 times, because it's that important. That's what gets it right. And I'm not going to draw from the holster 10,000 times with live fire. There's no reason to. I can do dry fire with that, right?
Sure.
So there's a lot that can come on the training side with dry fire. There's a lot of things that can be practiced that don't have to be done on a range. I know you guys up, in the northern tier of states, you guys have something called winter and snow. And
yeah.
we don't have that kind of nonsense down here, right? But when you're facing that, I mean, we get a lot of rain down here, so can't go out to the range. It's nothing to throw up, a little plastic table and work on weapon manipulation drills off of the table, right? Mm-hmm. Or work on transitions from the rifle to the pistol, right? Dumping the rifle.
Yep.
There's,
Yep.
Little things that you don't ever think of. In fact, picked up some stuff with Joe Farewell at the last seminar he was at that he gave here, and it transformed how I dump the shotgun in the barrel, because it frees up my pistol hand to be able to be drawing my pistol while I'm dumping the shotgun at the same time. Little things like that will make a difference, that you don't have to be on a range to practice.
Right.
So for newer people, I would really encourage them to, take that time. I mean, your wife and kids are going to think you're crazy anyway, right? So you may
absolutely
take full advantage of it. Make sure the weapons are clear, but do a lot of dry fire, do a lot of transitions, do a lot of, Josh Froelich does a great job on his videos and showing a lot of stuff that he does. Now he does a lot of live fire stuff, right? But a lot of the things that he does can be done in a dry fire environment and really build those neuro pathways, build those skill sets that need to be built in order to be successful.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I invested a little money in some dummy rounds, dummy shotgun rounds that are actually weighted for the shotgun, just so I can practice the damn quad load on a shotgun. And the first ones I got were garbage, but that's another story. I got some that are full-sized, actually weighted, and they worked out great. And it's something I can do watching TV or wherever I am in the household, slap my belt on, put them in, grab the shotgun, and just practice the reloading.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many skill sets in 3-gun that can be practiced without having to fire a shot. Yep. And, what's kind of ironic is that's actually where matches are won and lost. It's what you do when you're not shooting. And this is something you and I talked about at the Mission 22 match, right? It's how quickly do you get from point A to point B? Right. And it's, Jay has got some of the fastest feet I've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's like crazy. I'm like, what do you want? I mean, that dude moves from one point to the next faster than, just about anybody out there. But it's not just about being a superstar sprinter or having really fast feet. It's about being efficient, right?
Yeah.
And those efficiencies get picked up, in between the shooting. It's not just shooting quickly and shooting accurately to bring things full circle. What I said earlier, You know, it's what you do when you're not shooting that's going to win the match or is going to lose a match, or, you know, for people who maybe aren't in it to win it, but it's going to move you up in the standings to a point where, you know, you give a presentable or respectable finish, and something you can be proud of, right? Because
Sure.
it's, you know, it's kind of funny. You look at the guys who play this game at the top level, they never look like they're trying hard, right? They just kind of seem to float through the stage. You look at Jerry Miculek, he just, you know, guys in his 60s,
yeah,
and he's out there just schooling guys who are in their 20s and 30s. And, you know, you watch him in the stage, and he's not the fastest runner, right? I mean, he's not a superstar athlete. He's a phenomenal shooter. He doesn't miss. That helps.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't hurt.
but when he gets from one stage to or one position to the next inside a stage, and when he's transitioning, they're all super smooth. There's no wasted effort at all. And you know, you ever watch Horner? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, Horner is the picture and the epitome of you know, that fluid movement. Joel Turner, you know, I mean, Joel does the same thing. It's just super fluid. You know, Greg Jordan.
Yeah,
Greg never looks like he's, you know, he gets to the end of a match, the guy's not even breathing hard. You know, I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah. He's just very smooth in everything. Keith Garcia. I mean, you watch Keith Garcia's videos when he's doing his weapon manipulation drills, and you're like, how the hell is he so fast? I mean, he doesn't even look like he's trying. And that just comes from thousands and thousands of repetitions that, quite frankly, don't have anything to do with the shooting, but that will win matches because it's what happens when you're not shooting that makes the difference.
Right. And I would say also, you know, for people, because I hadn't pulled a trigger, geez, for almost 16, 17 years after I got out of the military, just got into competitive shooting last year, and kind of like in the position of setting realistic goals. Like, I know, okay, I'm not going to be a threat to be, at least at this point, to be like up in the top. But I look at it more like, okay, how many good stages can I have? And if I have a bad stage, okay, what did I learn from having a bad stage? And trying to fix little things, you know, what could I do better? Like the loading, like, you know, the moving, running between, the transition between dumping the shotgun, maybe drawing the pistol, etc., and improving on the small points and being realistic.
Well, and that's, you know, to me, that's really how you become competitive, right? It's focusing on one or two things at every match, right? So a couple of years ago, every single match, I would be fast, but I'd miss targets all over the place. I mean, it was freaking, my accuracy was horrible. And, you know, and so I take a lot of penalties for misses, and, you know, and then occasionally for FTEs, failure to engage at all, because I'd run right by a target. Because I was running everything at 100%.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was missing like 50% what I was shooting at. And so, you know, again, setting the goals, like you said. So I started setting the goal that, okay, this match is going to be a penalty-free match, right? So now I got to get through here penalty-free, which means what? It means I got to take my time and take the targets, right? And so, you know, the penalties started dropping off, and I started moving up in the standings. And, you know, late that year, I actually won the Southeast Division Three-Gun Nation Heavy Championship. I mean, I was top shooter in the heavy division, and it was because that one happened to be a penalty-free match. And, you know, it wasn't that I shot any faster, and I didn't run any faster. In fact, I was slower at a lot of the running and a lot of the movement and a lot of, you know, the things that I was normally pretty fast at. But my times were better, right? Because the penalties had been removed.
Because the penalties were lower, sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so gonna wrap this up now. just real quick, what's your next competition?
So we're doing Texas Three Gun Championship this weekend. Looking forward to that one. That one's going to it really kind of kicks off the three gun season right now. Now things really start to heat up. We start looking at a lot of matches going through the next few months. In May, I will be in New Mexico at the He-Man Nationals, which is an all heavy division match.
Nice.
Everybody who shoots that match is a heavy division shooter. It's a great match. They do a phenomenal job of running it. It's in a beautiful area, the Whittington Center, which is an NRA facility. It's massive. I mean, it's beautiful. It's up in the mountains. I go out there a week early. I take an entire vacation.
Nice.
I say vacation. It's not. I go out a week early. I bring my sandbags. I bring my my kettlebells and my weighted vest, and I spend the entire week literally doing nothing but working out and shooting, right, and just getting acclimated to the altitude and unplugging a little bit. So we got that one coming up, and then we just start moving through the year. Vortex Shooter Source coming up after that, which again, phenomenal match. If you're going to travel to Texas for a match, that's one of the ones to definitely come to. Okay. Great match there, and then we just start moving through the rest of the season. We got Wyoming Governors, we got the Mission 22 again. I signed up for that already.
Oh, you are going to be back at Mission 22.
Absolutely,
great,
yeah, absolutely.
Good,
great match. You guys did a phenomenal job. It was a little unnerving being behind enemy lines, being up that close to Chicago there. With being from Texas, I always feel like I'm
signed up. I actually signed up on a squad that with Jason and Team Trichicon just purely for the learning. So I can say, even though I'm shooting the factory or limited, whatever they're calling division, but just so I can watch all of these heavy hitters.
Absolutely. Great way to do it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Bill, you know what? Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Again, for people who are watching, this link will be uploaded, so you can paste it, anywhere. It's archived on YouTube. Anybody can come back and watch this anytime. Jason obviously didn't make it tonight, but I'm sure I'm going to get him on again down the road. But glad to have you on, and it was great talking to you, and I can't wait to see you back up here in September.
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Take care.
Take care. We'll see you.